All right, folks, now that we've gotten our designs for the side walls, then you're going to need all this stuff: straight edge, your scale, your pins, a good eraser, your saw, something to saw on, like an old piece of scrap wood, or the boards that those blue boxes are on. Glue, you might have some tacky glue, in which case you've got some little wire snippers you can cut the top off with. Because they're new, and your little clothespins might be helpful later on. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And you will also need your longer boards, some more studs, and your thicker board that's for the door and window headers. It's probably broken on the ends for you. I've already cut mine to length because I messed up on an earlier video. And so anyway, I've already got those. When you cut these, I would use, like, I've got an old piece of scrap wood. Again, when you cut, make really, don't push too hard with your saw. Make really kind of gentle cuts. Make sure that you're square both this way, right? And make sure that you're square and not tilting your saw one way or the other, so you have nice clean ends. The way I cut mine was I actually set my board, I cut it in square, then I set one end on the against the where it's going to end here on one side of the king stud, and then I marked the board on the other side exactly where it's going to fit, and then cut it. Rather than measure it and transferring the measurement, I actually used my template that I already had. In the building world, we try and use what we've got as much as possible. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use that same idea. You're going to need some studs, and you're going to need 4 total studs. You're going to need your glue, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut our jack studs. So I've got 4 studs here. They're going to be the king studs and the jack studs, and we're going to do this for each wall. In fact, you might even do it all together at once with all 4 jack studs, because you're going to have jack studs for the windows, jack studs for the doors, right? I'm going to do 2 because I already have some of these made. So like I said, I like to use the template that I built. I know that my template is right. I'm making sure that I'm lined up right there with where that top of the header goes, from the top of the bottom plate to the bottom of the header, and that's going to be my jack studs. Now again, you got to make sure your drawing was right in the first place. And I've got just a piece of scrap wood here I'm going to use as my cutting board. You could also use that board that came with the blue boxes on it. And we're going to cut those again, and I'm cutting them both at the same time. And nice and easy. I'm not pushing too hard because I want to make sure I have a nice clean cut. Okay. I keep going till I'm all the way through. Save these little pieces because we can use them for the cripples up there above the header. All right, so those are my 2 jack studs, and I need my 2 king studs. And what we're going to do is we're going to put these together first. So in the real world, when we're building a wall like this, we put this framework that includes the king studs, jack studs, and headers for a door or window, and you build that all at one time. And then insert it in as one piece. It makes it a lot easier than trying to build it while you've got the wall in pieces. So we've got our 2 king studs, our 2 jack studs, and they're going to get put together. Now, normally, if we were doing this in the yard, we'd nail them together, but we've got these pins that we're using as nails, and these things are crazy long. That header is 5.5 inches. So if you look at that, that's like 7 inches long. That's a crazy long nail. So, some things aren't quite reality. So those nails aren't going to work to hold those things together, because they're going to go poking through them, because a 1.5 inch board and a 1.5 inch board are 3 inches. We use 2 3/4 inch 16 penny nails, which don't go all the way through, but that's not going to work. So we're going to cheat a little bit and use glue. So here's what I would do is take your jack stud, put a little bit of glue. Little goes a long way. Okay. And Elmer's glue and tacky glue works really well. In fact, those of you that have this blue gel, I found it actually doesn't work as well as just regular Elmer's glue, but that's what we ended up with. So for those of you with the blue glue and this, honestly, if this is what you got in your box and you've got some white Elmer's glue hanging around, just normal school glue, I would rather go with that. Make sure that you're even on the bottom. Make sure that these ends aren't like this, right? Or like that. Make sure that they're nice and square and even on the bottom. You can even do that by feel. Okay. And then if they're gluing together, great. I found that that I needed to, they started separating. So this is where your little clothespins can come in handy, is you're going to glue these together, hold them together at the ends and make sure they're together in the middle. And while that's drying, you can work on cutting your bottom plates and your, and getting all of that together. Okay. All right. Now I have already, just like a cooking show, I've already put some of these together so you can see how that works. If you're not familiar in a cooking show, they already have one in the oven while they're putting one together, right? All right, so now we've got our jack studs, king studs, and we've cut the header to the right length. So I've got my jack studs, king studs, and header. All right, so now let's talk about how to put these. And I'll get a blank sheet of paper right here to show you what I'm working on. And I forgot earlier that we also need our hammer, right? So we're going to lay this all out and put this thing together. And on each side, we're going to do 2 nails on one side and 1 nail on the other side. So we're going to put a nail fairly close to it, and hopefully you're getting better at angling these nails a little bit, these pins, so that you're not poking through and that you're sure you're not going to get a shiner. I'll put on my glasses here so I can see a little better. All right, so put 1 there, 1 approximately right there. And we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm just going to flip it around so I can work right-handed. So again, I'm making sure that that header is sitting down against the jack stud and that there's no gap there. And make sure I didn't poke through the other side. I was kind of steep on that one. All right. And I'm also making sure that this is laying nice and flat and nothing's crooked or... All right. So we've got two nails on one end of each side. Now I'm going to flip it over and put 1 nail on the other end. So you're probably pausing this, doing your own, and then speeding it up a little bit. All right, very nice. And 3 nails. Ooh, that looks nice and pretty, all neat and straight. That one wasn't quite as clean, but looks nice. All right. Now, before I get going, I'm going to cut my little my cripples that are going to be in there. And if I look at my plan, there's 2 of them, and I'm gonna cut those right now. Right now that I've got this off, because I can use my template here and cut this guy. So I'm gonna make a mark and make another mark And again, that way I'm using what I've got so I get a nice accurate measurement. I have to remember what side I did here. And again, get my little cutting board out. I'm going to cut both of these at the same time, making sure that they're nice and even on the end. This one's going to be a little tricky because I got to hold them nice and steady, and get my saw. It's a little hard to tell. It's hard to see it, but I've got my little mark there. Now on this one, I'm going to go right on the mark because I want to cut that mark away. When you make marks with a pencil, you're actually outside a little bit. Boy, this is going to be tricky to hold these down at the same time. And I want to make sure that they fit. So I'm actually cutting the pencil mark away. Again, nice and gentle and not putting a lot of pressure on there. All right, very good. So now I've got my two little cripples. Now these little guys aren't going to be used for anything, so those actually I can toss. That way I'm also making sure I'm not accidentally using them. All right, so I'm going to set aside those little cripples, and we'll use those later. All right, so now I've got my door frame. It's going to be the same process for the window, basically, but the window is just a little bit different. And let's talk about that one. Now, unlike the door, the window's got a bunch of pieces we're going to put together. So we're going to do our two king studs, our two jack studs, just like we did with the door, except now what we're going to add is we're going to add these cripples that are on the side that are serving like a windowsill jack stud. And we're going to put the windowsill in. So we're going to need a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total pieces cut to length before we get started. Now, if you remember from one of the other parts, I can't remember what it was, we had some of these pieces left over, and we had 3 or 4 of them that we can cut to length. And these are just barely long enough that I'm going to be able to cut them down. Not long enough for the sill, though. So the sill I'm going to have to cut out of one of these longer boards like these guys, because I don't want to cut them from my studs. My studs are going to be used only for studs until I absolutely need them. So because they're cut to length. So I'm going to get one of those longer ones to cut the sill from. All right. So we know what we're doing with that. I'm just going to do it, and through the magic of editing, jump to that step. Ta-da! I've got my jack studs, king studs combination. I've got my header that is cut to exact length. I have got a sill that I marked with sill because it's just barely longer than the 4 cripples, so I didn't want to confuse those. I've got my 4 cripples. That are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm set up and ready to go. Now, before I put this all together, I'm going to actually install, and we would do this in real life too. In fact, we put them all together at once. We're actually going to do, just like we did the jack studs, we're going to do this sill jack stud or this cripple on each one of the walls, same way as we did before. With some glue, and we're going to glue those guys on. I'm hating this blue glue, so if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't use it. I'd use regular old Elmer's glue. So much better for wood anyway. All right, but we're dealing with what we got here. So I figure I won't cheat and go get different glue, and just in case there's others out there using this stuff. Again, we're going to line up, make sure that those ends are nice and square and straight. We're making sure everything's lined up, flush, all that nice stuff. All right, now a little check before we move on and put things together. I want to make sure that my sill is exactly 2 boards widths shorter than my header. So I'm going to take 2 boards that I already have, these other 2 cripples, put them together and line them up with the end like this so that they're nice and flush, and see if that sill is exactly the length to the other end. It should be just about perfect. And if it's not, it's a little bit short. But that's okay. I don't mind it. Move that into the cameras. You can probably see how it's just a little bit short right here. Now it's going to be pretty close, but I might want to take these ends and I'm just going to kind of press them against the table a little bit, because balsa, you can actually just kind of press on it and get those ends. So I'm actually just doing this and this just to straighten them and shorten them a little bit. Make sure that I'm compressing that as much as possible. All right, here we go. Let's talk about how to put this guy together. I don't know if anybody caught that earlier in the video, but I actually had this board glued on here instead of on there where it should have been. Luckily, I caught it before it glued, or I would have had a whole bunch of waste there and I would have messed it all up. So good thing I caught that. Sorry if people were confused before and went, "What are you doing, Clint? Why are you messing up like that?" All right. So now we've got our structure for our jack studs, king studs, and cripple jack studs. All right, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my cripple first, just like we did with the other one. 2 nails on one end and 1 nail on the other end. Got it, with the 3 nails and the 3 nails. Okay, we're looking good. Now, the sill is going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to put the word sill downward so it's not as easy to see. When you put the sill in there, I mean, look at it. It should look nice and square. It shouldn't be flared way out or pitched in. If it is, you might have to cut that sill out again. All right, now this one's going to be a little bit tricky. It might even be harder to hold these nails because we're going to go through and into that little jack stud, and it's going to be kind of hard to get to. So we're going to go a little bit in from the end. Try and line up. There, that's about right. I'm going to zoom in on this. See how that nail, I've got enough room to get to it. When we're building in the yard, you have to be able to get your hammer in there. So it has to be far enough out that you can get your hammer in, but not so far it's going to split this wood and angle just a little bit so it goes into there. So that one's just about right. Make sure I'm going straight. All right, that looks pretty good. Same thing on the other side. We're going to put that nail again at a little bit of an angle, right about like, oh boy, these are tricky. Little pair of needle nose might help, but I'm actually finding that I'm able to use my fingers a little bit better here. There we go. Good, at a little bit of an angle like that. I'm not going to get my fingers in the way again, but all right. Oh, shiner. I have to start that one over again. Back it out. Now, this brings up a good point. If I go to the same hole I was just in before, it's going to follow that same pathway. So I have to move it to a different spot. I can't try and go in that same hole again, or it's going to, oh, my glue came apart right there. Okay. I didn't let it dry long enough. There we go. Boy, I'm having a rough time with this one, but I'm looking to make sure that I'm staying at the right angle as I push that guy in. There we go. Now I'm not going to get that shiner. So we're doing that on one side, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. That's just a little fleck right there that might have looked like a nail, but it wasn't. It was just a little piece of balsa. All right. Now that we've got the wall built, I just realized that I'm going to need to cut one more of these cripples because I had forgotten from our design that there's one more that actually is right up in here. So I'm going to cut one more, and I'm actually going to install that piece and glue that also right up against there. And put that in place because I had forgotten and not counted that one originally. I have to edit this video and put that in earlier. All right, whoa, flipping this stuff over. Good thing it's just school glue and it comes off things really easy. All right, so now we've got our window frame. Now, while you weren't looking and I can edit this video, I actually added, I didn't realize there were, there should have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those small boards because I forgot about this one that continues the pattern that's up here with the 16, 16, 16 that we needed that extra one down in there that we talked about last time. So I'm going to have to cut one more of those. I glued this one in also, so there's actually 4 in a row. And now we're going to put this guy together. You need your some longer pieces for your top and bottom plate. Now they're going to be just a little tiny bit longer so than what you need, just by a little tiny bit, like 1/8 of an inch. So you're not going to cut very much off, but you still do need to cut them to length. Now, I also wrote on mine top and bottom plate because they are different, because this one's getting all these different things down here and the top plate doesn't have the same thing. So we're going to do just like we did the last time, marking all of where all of the studs go. And then we're going to put this together and leave the cripples for last. I'll talk about that as the last thing that we do. So go ahead and cut your top and bottom plate, mark the top and bottom plate with where all the studs are, and go ahead and put that thing together. And we will talk about how to do the cripples last. And before I forget, we need the top cripples. So I'm going to do what I did before. Make that little mark. Now, I don't have very many little pieces left over, but if I can do that, I'll cut all of them at the same time. If I have some, I have one little piece hanging out there over there. So again, we're going to cut all of our little cripple pieces also. And next step will be, after we put this all together without these 2 cripples in, or these 3 cripples in, but the rest of the wall is built, and then we'll talk about how to do those pieces. All right, so that turned out pretty nice. Got my 2 nails in each spot up there, 2 nails on the bottom. Now, one thing that I'm okay with you doing is just putting 2 nails on the inside most or the outside boards each, just to avoid too many of them. If we were doing this in real life, we'd put 2 in each, but that one's okay. All right. By the way, if yours looks a little bit different than mine, that's because I'm using boards that are a little bit skinnier from some leftover stock that I had. Yours will look a little bit thicker than this. All right. So I got my three cripples for the top and my 2 down here for the bottom. The bottom ones are going to be pretty basic. We're going to install those just like we did with the studs for that go all the way across. We're going to see, like you can tell, I cut this out of the other stock because it's skinny. So it's a little skinnier than the boards that you have, but that's okay. They work out. All right, so just like before, we're putting 2 nails top, 2 nails bottom through the sill and through the bottom plate. 2 nails through the sill, 2 nails through the bottom. Now let's talk about these little guys that are going to go to the top. So on these are going to be a little bit difficult. If we put nails, this thing's going to probably split apart. So I think it would be a good idea for us to just use your glue, put a little dab of glue on one end that's going to go against the header, and then we'll pin through the top plate. So we won't try and do a toenail on these guys, because I think it might just split them apart. So we're going to put that in there. Okay. Put it in the right split place. So it's being glued to the header, but on the top we're going to use a nail. This is going to be a little delicate here. You're going to have to, and I purposely cut them a little bit too short, so that they would fit in there. If they're too long, then that's going to be a problem. If it's a tiny bit too short, it's not that big of a deal. Now on the top, let's just go ahead and do 1 nail right through the middle, just to avoid, again, splitting this. And we're going to go right through the middle of this. There we go. All right, now I'm not pushing too hard on that because I want this to stay straight. So we've got glue on one side and 1 nail on the other. And voila, a door with a window. So the same process for these cripples up here are going to be followed when you do the door, and none of this is there for the door. So same process. And congratulations, you've gotten the walls done. Next step is putting the walls up. All right, enjoy. See you next time.